What's up, guys? We are back with another G.I. Joe Classified review, taking a look today at Scarlett. This is probably the one figure, well, outside from Roadblock maybe, that has been maybe the most divisive because she's got some of the Fortnite stuff going on in terms of some of the crazy colors. So I'm curious to see what's going on here. We've got her in the same kind of box that we saw with Roadblock, so figure they're in the window. You got the Joe logo down there on the bottom. Some artwork of her down there in the corner with some stats that run down the side. She is number 5 in this line, and then you've got a shot of her on the other side with a shot of that big print spread on the back that showcases all the figures in Wave 1, and then maybe a bunch of other figures that we're going to get in this kind of artwork style. So let's do it. Let's pull her out and take a look. And here she is out of the package, our Scarlett figure, and I think it goes without saying really that this is the figure that clearly drew the most ire from fans when it came time to really being concerned, I suppose, if this was or wasn't the line for them, because Scarlett is definitely a departure in a number of ways. She sort of stands apart from the rest of the figures, even more so than Roadblock does. He's a little bit more, I guess, stylized, but Scarlett is definitely a little different. She has what a lot of people I've seen kind of liken her to being more along the lines of like the Renegades look, which is, I suppose I can kind of see that, but it's also not nearly like this either. She's still very, very different. So this one is a little bit more interesting in terms of design choices, I would say, than some of the other figures. But there is still some pretty cool stuff going on here. And we've got a pretty solid figure as far as construction, too. She is, just like with Roadblock, very similar in construction to most Marvel Legends females. But at the same time, she has a lot of new stuff that you don't see in Marvel Legends either. So stuff that makes them unique to the G.I. Joe line. So you've got an articulated neck. It does bobble up and down, and it tilts side to side a little bit. It's not all that helpful. It is a little restricted by the collar, and then her head looks up, and she looks down really good, and then you've got full rotation, and you do have pretty good tilt, so a little attitude on her. You've got an arm that has this big shoulder pad here. It only goes out that far on her left or right. The right side does go out all the way, though, and then you can rotate fully at the shoulder. There is a little butterfly joint there. It's minimal, but it does help. You've got your kind of Hasbro female standard single rotating elbows, and then you've got hinges, and you've got rotation at those wrists. She has a lateral hinge on her left side, and then she has a vertical hinge on her right. We've got a diaphragm cut, so she goes all the way around, tilt side to side, backwards, forwards, and then you've got the ball-pegged waist like we've seen with all the other Joes so far. So she goes fully backwards, pretty good. And then she goes forwards a decent bit. Not as much backward, but it's pretty good. So she goes really far around, honestly. More so than, again, a lot of female Marvel Legends. So that's one of the things that is different in that regard. She also has the drop-down hips like Roadblock did, but she is a little bit easier to work with because her hips aren't nearly as chunky. So she goes up and down really good. Her legs go all the way out, really, especially if you engage those... you know, if you engage those drop downs, she gets a pretty good splits. It's not full, but she goes pretty far out, and then you kick all the way. She does have a good kick on the backswing. There is a thigh cut. You've got a double jointed knees that work really well. Boot cut down here that's hidden really nicely by that actual boot, and then you got rocker, and you've got hinges down at those ankles. So she is very, very familiar territory if you're used to female Marvel Legends, but at the same time, she does have some upgraded pieces like the torso and waist section, and then those drop-down hips and things like that. The only real negative, as far as I'm concerned on this figure, is this arm here, because, I mean, you can't really do much more than that. It's just going to get in the way, and that's just something based on her design. And her design is, well, it's kind of gaudy. It's very different. It stands out from the rest of the crew. So you've got Roadblock, who has a little bit of this sort of gold and maybe a little sci-fi-ish armor leanings. She kind of leans into it pretty hard with the gold all over the breastplate, on the gauntlets, and then on the knee pads and on the shin guards. Again, you know, like I said a few times already in other videos, I'm not a G.I. Joe purist, so that doesn't necessarily bother me. It's not a huge deal. I don't think she looks bad. I just think she looks a little different. There is a distinct style difference in some ways between her and the guys, really. She seems to be just a little bit more almost on the cartoony side, especially when we get up to the head sculpt. But I do think that the actual body that we're working with here is really nicely done. I mean, she looks pretty fantastic. There's a lot of little detail all over, like seam lines that run down her midriff, and then a lot of texturing on the pants itself. Tons and tons of paint detail and little sculpt work all over her shin guards and knee pads, and then on her gauntlets you've got the little darts, the shuriken almost, that are on her wrist guard over here. I do like the asymmetrical design for her armor, outside of the fact, you know, that it does that. She's got a free-floating belt that leans to one side. You can, you know, move it around to help aid in articulation, and then, of course, maybe hide a joint here and there. And then she's got this free-floating piece for storage of her weapons. So she's got the arrows for her crossbow on her back, and then you can store all of her knives on her at any given time, which I've said a number of times, I really dig that. I love being able to actually store weapons on a figure, and it's great to actually be able to give her everything all at once and have her fully loaded out. So while she does look really different from a lot of the other figures, I don't find that to be a huge problem. I do think in a general sense that she just looks like a pretty cool female figure. The head, though, like I said, is maybe an area where I think people have some issues with her, because she does kind of give off a slightly cartoony vibe. And I think it just comes down to colors and the way everything is really bright and vibrant. It's kind of an unnaturally orange head of hair. You've got a ton of freckles on her face, so she kind of looks a little childish as well. She looks a little young, which is maybe some of the G.I. Joe Renegades leanings that people are putting on this figure. I do think that we have a pretty solid head sculpt. The photo printing is really nicely done. There's a good wash in the hair, at least on the front here, to really bring out some of that sculpt. But she, again, does kind of stand out from the pack. She maybe looks a little bit younger, but at the end of the day, I mean, it's a solid head sculpt. I don't really have any issues with it. It's really clean, nicely done. Paint is nicely applied. And I mean, it looks fine. It's just a little bit different from the pack. And since this is such a new thing, a new figure, a new line, we have to do some size comparisons just to see how they stack up. So we've got the other figures that I've gotten a hold of so far. So the Snake Eyes, she is a little bit shorter. And then you've got Roadblock, who is not too much taller than Snake Eyes, but is a lot beefier than all the other figures. So you can see how they kind of scale within their own line. And then we've got like a few other figures. So here is a Marvel Legends. We've got the recent Marvel, and then we've got Winston from Ghostbusters. You can see that Scarlett towers over him, which is still ridiculous. And then we've got a female Marvel Legend, so one of the recent Black Widows, to give you an idea of how she stacks up with another kind of normal female. So she definitely will fall in line with a lot of Hasbro stuff, and you'll be able to put her in with a lot of Marvel Legends without any issues, and Black Series stuff like that. Maybe not these guys, though. Now, as far as accessories goes, like I mentioned, she does come with a handful of knives, and they can all be stored on her at any given time. So we've got one knife here on her front that is in that sheath right there, and this is a unique knife. The other two are identical. So this one's a little small curved blade. They're all lacking in paint. None of her weapons have any paint on them, so that's kind of a big negative, at least compared to some of the other figures in this line so far. So she's just got an all-black knife here, and then she's got these two on the back. And frankly, I wasn't sure if these actually went in this. There's just a slot in this compartment, and I figured, well, that's probably what it's for, and you can fit both knives in here. There's no indication that anything else goes in there, and it is a pretty tight fit, at least at first. So you've got these two combat-style knives with the little serrated edges on them. Again, no paint, black plastic, two identical knives, and then we've got her final weapon, which is her crossbow here. So it goes along with the arrow motif on her back, and you've got this, again, just kind of like a futuristic, techie, sci-fi crossbow thing, but it's weird because it does pop apart. So this part is separate from this. I'm assuming it's a manufacturing thing. No paint, pretty cool, but it is one of those science fiction-y kind of weapons, no real-world looking crossbow. And again, no paint on anything, so it's pretty basic stuff, but it does fit the character pretty well. So overall, I think we've got a pretty solid figure here. Just like the others that I've taken a look at so far, there is a lot to like about this figure. Granted, she is a little bit different than the rest. She is far flashier than any other figure in this wave so far. She is very different from her classic figure, and that might be too much for some folks. But for me, I don't really mind it. I think she looks pretty cool. She moves really well. My only real negatives on this one is that, well, she has that kind of wonky arm that can't move a certain way because of that shoulder pad, and then you've got no paint on any of the accessories. Otherwise, though, she is a marked upgrade from a lot of figures that we've seen from Hasbro as far as females, because she can move exceptionally well outside of that. And she's got a ton of paint apps on the figure itself, and everything about her is really crisp and clean. She just, again, is a little bit different from the rest of these figures. So that's going to do it for this look at the G.I. Joe Classified Scarlett figure. Let me know what you guys think. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and share, and until next time.